The text came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and I almost didn't see it. I was still at my desk in the spare bedroom I'd converted into a home office, the one with the crooked blind that never closed all the way and let in the orange glow of the streetlight outside. My tea had gone cold an hour ago. I was finishing up a project proposal for a client in Calgary, the kind of quiet, focused work that makes you forget what time it is, forget to eat, forget everything except the task in front of you. My phone buzzed. I assumed it was my alarm reminding me to take my medication. I didn't reach for it right away. I finished the paragraph I was typing. Then I picked up the phone. It was a voice memo from my mother-in-law. 43 seconds long. That was strange. She never sent voice memos. She barely knew how to use the phone her son set up for her the previous Christmas. I figured she'd accidentally pressed something while trying to call me, recorded herself mid-conversation and hit send without realizing it. I pressed play. The first thing I heard was laughter. Not warm laughter, the kind you get at a dinner table when someone tells a story everyone's heard before but still finds funny. Sharp laughter, mean laughter, the kind that has a target. Then I heard my name. Simone is so convinced she's doing us this massive favor, my sister-in-law said. I recognized her voice immediately. She has this particular way of drawing out syllables when she's being condescending. She shows up in that beat-up little Civic and acts like she's royalty. More laughter. She thinks she's so smart, my mother-in-law added. Meanwhile, she's burning herself out for what? She's going to wake up one day with nothing to show for it. She already has nothing, my sister-in-law said. No kids, no real career, just that little freelance thing she does on her laptop. My brother could have done so much better. I set the phone down on my desk. I didn't press stop. I just set it down and stared at the wall. The heat came up slowly, the way it does when something hits you so hard your body doesn't know what to do with it. It started in my chest, moved up into my throat. I didn't cry. I've never been a crier, which is something my mother used to say wasn't healthy. And maybe she was right, because instead of crying I just sat very still for a long time while the voice memo finished playing and the room got quiet again. I want to tell you who I am so you understand what came next. I'm a technical writer and content strategist. I run my own business, have for almost 6 years now. I work with software companies, mostly mid-sized ones, looking to clean up their documentation and build out their knowledge bases. It's not glamorous work. Nobody at a party ever gets excited when I explain what I do. But it pays well. Better than well, actually. By the time I was 29, I was billing more annually than most people I knew who'd spent years climbing corporate ladders. I drive a 2014 Honda Civic. It has 187,000 kilometers on it and a scratch on the rear bumper from a parking lot in Sudbury, and I have no plans to replace it until it stops running. I don't own designer clothes or take elaborate vacations. I live in a modest semi-detached in East Hamilton that I bought with a down payment I saved over 4 years. I don't talk about money. I never have. That was the problem. That was, I understand now, the entire foundation of the problem. My husband's family, his mother, his sister, his brother-in-law, had no real idea what I did or how much I made. They saw a woman in an old car who worked from home on a laptop. They drew their conclusions, and in the 3 years I'd been married to my husband, I had never corrected them. I just kept my head down and did what I'd been doing quietly for almost 2 years by the time that voice memo arrived. I was paying their bills, not directly, not in a way that was obvious. It started small the way these things always do. My mother-in-law had moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Stony Creek after my father-in-law passed. She was 64, had worked in retail her whole life, and her pension was modest. Her rent was $1,450 a month. She was barely covering it. My husband was close with her, genuinely, not in a performative way, and I watched him stress about her finances for months after his dad died. One night I told him I wanted to help. He pushed back, said it wasn't my responsibility, said we'd figure something out as a family. But I knew what figure something out as a family meant. It meant everyone agreeing something should be done and no one actually doing it. So I set up an automatic transfer from my business account. $500 a month, consistent, no fanfare. I told him it was our contribution to help her while she got settled. He thanked me. He didn't know I was paying the other $952 quietly, through a separate arrangement I'd made directly with her landlord. She never asked where the full amount came from. I don't think she thought too hard about it. Then my sister-in-law's situation came up. She and her husband had bought a place in Burlington right before interest rates climbed. By spring of the following year, their renewal was brutal. Their monthly payment jumped by over $800. They had 2 kids in daycare. They were stretched thin in a way that was becoming a genuine crisis. She mentioned it at Easter dinner, not to me specifically, but to the table. It was the kind of mention that was really a plea. My husband heard it. He came to me that night and said his sister was struggling. I said I knew. I called a number I had for a private lending company I'd heard about through a client, and I quietly arranged for a personal loan to be extended to cover the gap in their mortgage payments for 12 months, while they stabilized. I structured it so it didn't look like it was coming from family. I used a numbered company I'd originally set up for a different business purpose and hadn't dissolved yet. The loan had an interest rate of 0. They thought it was a government relief program. I'm not telling you this to paint myself as a saint. I know how it sounds. And looking back, I can see what I was doing and why, even if I couldn't articulate it at the time. I grew up in a family where being needed was the closest thing to being loved, where showing up with solutions was how you earned your place. I thought if I could just hold everything together behind the scenes, keep everyone afloat, keep the family stable, they would feel it, even if they didn't know it was me. Some part of me believed that doing good quietly would eventually translate into being treated well. I know now that's not how it works. Over the course of roughly 20 months, I had covered, at various points, my mother-in-law's rent shortfall, my sister-in-law's mortgage gap, a car repair bill for my brother-in-law's pickup truck that would have cost him his job if he couldn't get to the work site, and 3 months of my mother-in-law's grocery delivery after she had knee surgery and couldn't get out easily. Total, across all of it, was somewhere in the range of $42,000. I had never mentioned it to anyone except my husband and only partially to him. He knew about the $500 a month. He didn't know the full scope. I kept careful records, spreadsheets, receipts, bank statements. Not because I intended to ask for the money back, I didn't, but because I'm a person who documents things. It's literally my job. The voice memo changed everything. I listened to it twice more after the first time. Once with my heart racing, once with something colder settling into my chest. The full 43 seconds. My mother-in-law talking about how my husband had married down. My sister-in-law agreeing. Her husband saying something I won't repeat here because it genuinely took my breath away when I heard it. All of them laughing in a way that made it clear this wasn't a bad night, wasn't a slip, wasn't out of character. This was just how they talked about me. I didn't call my husband that night. He was out of town for work. He does field project management and spends about a week a month in different cities. I sat with it alone, which is maybe how it was always going to happen. I have a friend named Bex who I've known since we were 11 years old. We met in a swimming program in Ancaster, and we've stayed close in that particular way of women who've seen each other through everything. Bex is a paralegal. She has a sharp mind and a very low tolerance for nonsense. I texted her at midnight. I said, I need to talk to you tomorrow. Nothing is on fire, but something is very wrong. She called me at 8 a.m. I played her the voice memo over the phone without saying anything first. I let it finish. Then there was a long silence. Forward that to yourself 3 times, she said. Email cloud backup and one more place. Do it right now. I did it while we were on the phone. Then she asked me to tell her everything and I did all of it. The $500 a month, the numbered company loan, the car repair, the groceries. All $42,000. There was another long silence. Simone, she said carefully, you understand that what you've been doing is extraordinarily generous, and that they have no idea, I know, and you understand that you don't owe them a single thing. Not going forward. I know. Okay, I could hear her thinking, so, what do you want to happen? That was the question I'd been sitting with since midnight. Not what should happen, not what was fair, what did I actually want? I thought about calling them out directly, sending the voice memo back with a message, confronting everyone at once, maybe at a family dinner, where it would all spill out ugly and loud. I thought about telling my husband and letting him handle it. I thought about disappearing quietly and just stopping. No explanation, no confrontation, just the transfers ending and the loan not being renewed. None of it felt right. Disappearing felt like letting them off the hook. Confronting them directly felt like giving them a chance to spin it, minimize it, make me the dramatic one who eavesdropped on a private conversation and blew everything out of proportion. I wanted something cleaner. I wanted them to understand without being able to argue with it. Beck said, "Do you still have access to that numbered company?" I did. "And the documentation for everything you've paid?" "All of it." She was quiet again for a moment. "Let me think about this," she said. "I'll call you tonight." I went back to work. I finished the Calgary proposal. I billed a client in Vancouver for a project I'd wrapped up that week. I answered emails and updated a style guide and made lunch from whatever was in the fridge and ate it standing at the kitchen counter. The ordinary work of an ordinary Tuesday, except that something had shifted irrevocably somewhere in my chest. Bex called at 7 that night. She'd talked to a lawyer friend of hers. Not to give legal advice, she said, but to think through options. "The loan to your sister-in-law," she said. "Through the numbered company. Is there any signed documentation?" I had sent them a simple repayment agreement at the time, framed as the relief program's standard paperwork. They'd signed it electronically because I'd told them it was required to process the funds. At the time, I hadn't thought past the immediate need. Looking at it now, with Bex on the phone, I realized that document actually was. It was a loan agreement, legally enforceable, for $31,000. I hadn't framed it that way when I'd set it up. I told myself it was just paperwork. But it was real. The interest rate was 0 and the repayment terms were loose. I'd listed them as to be determined upon program conclusion, but the agreement itself was binding. "You could leave it forever," Beck said, "or you could activate it." I sat with that. "Not to hurt them," she continued, "but to make them aware. To make them aware of what has been keeping them afloat. And who." The other thing I did that week, before I did anything else, was talk to my husband. This is the part people always want to know about. Did he know? Did he protect them? Whose side was he on? Here is the truth. He was devastated, not at me, at them. He'd heard something similar, he told me. A comment his mother had made at a birthday dinner the year before that he'd brushed off as her being her. He'd minimized it to protect his own peace. He knew I hadn't been warmly welcomed into the family, but he'd told himself it was a matter of time, that they'd come around, that he didn't need to intervene because it wasn't bad enough to justify the fallout. Listening to the voice memo changed that for him too. He sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands for a long time. "I should have said something a long time ago," he said. "I know I should have." I wasn't going to argue with him about that right now. We'd have those conversations carefully and honestly, in the weeks that followed. But in that moment I needed him to know what I'd been carrying, and I told him. All of it. Every transfer, every arrangement, every quiet decision I'd made to keep his family from going under while they sat around tables laughing at me. He went very still. $42,000, he said. Approximately. He didn't say anything for a while then. "What do you want to do?" "I want them to know," I said. "Not from anger, I just want them to actually know." He nodded. He said, "Okay. Then let's figure out how to do that." What we decided, together, after 3 long evenings of talking it through, was simple and I think more effective than any confrontation we could have staged. My husband called his mother and told her he needed to speak with the family, all of them. He arranged a Sunday dinner at his parents' old house, where his sister and brother-in-law still gathered most weeks. He said he had something important to discuss. He didn't tell them what. In the meantime, I contacted the numbered company's administrator, a small accounting firm I'd been using for years, and had them send a formal notice of account review to my sister-in-law and her husband. It was a real notice, professionally formatted, explaining that the loan under the relief program they'd received was being reviewed for status and that a summary of outstanding terms would be provided within 30 days. It was not threatening, it was simply real. I also wrote a letter, not to send, just to have. 12 pages, single-spaced, detailing every financial contribution I had made to members of this family over 20 months. Dates, amounts, source accounts, purposes. Every grocery order, every rent gap, every month of mortgage coverage. I included copies of all supporting documentation. I brought it to the Sunday dinner in a folder. I didn't bring it out right away. We sat down, we ate. There was an awkwardness in the room because they knew something was coming and didn't know what. My mother-in-law kept looking at me sideways. My sister-in-law was quieter than usual. My husband started. He said that he and I had been doing a lot of thinking about the family, about dynamics, about what it meant to support each other. He said there were some things that had come to light recently that he felt needed to be addressed openly. Then he played the voice memo from his own phone. He'd asked if he could be the one to do it, and I'd said yes. The room went very quiet. My mother-in-law went red in a way I'd never seen before. My sister-in-law looked at the table. Her husband opened his mouth and then closed it. My mother-in-law started to speak. I think she was going to say it was taken out of context or that they were just venting, or some version of that, and my husband held up one hand. I don't need a response to that right now, he said. But there's something else. That's when I put the folder on the table. I didn't make a speech. I didn't need to. I just said calmly, "This is a record of the financial support I've been providing to this family over the past 20 months. I kept documentation because that's what I do professionally. I'd like you to take some time to look through it." The silence that followed was unlike anything I've experienced in a room full of people. My sister-in-law picked up the first page. She looked at it for a long time. I watched the moment she recognized the numbered company's name from the loan paperwork she'd signed. She looked up at me. "The relief program," she said. Her voice was very quiet. "Was me," I said. My mother-in-law was looking at the rent shortfall entries. Her mouth had gone slightly open. "I didn't do it to hold it over you," I said. "I want you to understand that. I did it because I wanted your family to be okay. I wanted my husband's family to be okay. I kept it quiet because I didn't want anyone to feel embarrassed or indebted." I paused. "But I also need you to understand that the person you've been talking about the way you did on that recording, the person you called a failure who married down, who has nothing to show for herself, is the same person who has been keeping this family financially stable while you did it." Nobody said anything. "The loan," I continued, looking at my sister-in-law, "has a signed agreement. I have no intention of calling it in. But I want you to know it exists, and I want you to know who extended it to you." My brother-in-law was looking at his hands. He looked like a man who wanted very badly to be somewhere else. My mother-in-law, to her credit, started to cry. Not the defensive kind of crying, the other kind. The kind that means something has actually landed. My sister-in-law said quietly, "I didn't know." "No," I said. "You didn't. That's the point. I won't tell you that dinner ended with everyone hugging and apologizing, and the relationships transforming overnight. That would be a lie, and I think you know that's not how things like this work. What actually happened is that the dinner ended with a lot of quiet, and my husband and I drove home in silence, and when we got inside he held on to me in the hallway for a long time without saying anything. In the weeks that followed, the conversations happened slowly, imperfectly, the way real things happen. My mother-in-law called me, on her own, without my husband prompting her, and asked if we could have coffee. We met at a Tim Hortons near her apartment because she suggested it, and I didn't push for anything fancier. She said she was sorry. She said it simply and without qualifiers, and then sat quietly to let it be what it was. It didn't erase 2 years of being dismissed and condescended to. It didn't fix everything, but it was real. My sister-in-law took longer. She's someone who processes by getting very distant first, and for about 6 weeks she barely reached out. When she did, she sent a message saying that she'd been thinking a lot, that she'd talked to her husband, and that she owed me an apology she didn't know how to give yet, but wanted to try. "We're not close now. I'm not sure we will be. But the ice has a crack in it." My brother-in-law has never spoken to me directly about any of it. He's not that kind of person. But he's been different around me. Less dismissive, more careful. Sometimes people just need to know the truth about what they've been doing and left to sit with it. It's not satisfying, but it's something. The loan, as I said, I'm not calling in. I had Bex review the full picture with her lawyer contact, and we discussed the options, and I decided that the loan was never really about the money, it was about the structure. It existed to name the reality of what I'd done, that it was real, that it was documented, that it was something. That's all I needed. I stopped the automatic transfers in January. My mother-in-law's rent situation has actually improved. She took on a part-time position doing inventory for a local pharmacy, something she mentioned she'd been thinking about for a while but hadn't felt the push to pursue. I think the Sunday dinner was the push. When the structure that had been quietly holding your life together becomes visible, something changes. Not always in bad ways. I still drive the 2014 Civic. It needs new brake pads and I've been putting it off, but that's a different problem. My husband and I went through several hard months. Not because of what I'd done, but because of what he'd let slide for too long, and we both knew it. We went to a couples counselor, we found one we both liked, which took 3 tries, and we did the work. That's the only way I know how to describe it. We did the work. He asked me once, in the middle of one of those sessions, why I had never told him the full extent of what I was paying. Why I'd kept it from him. I thought about it for a real while before I answered. Because I knew if I said the whole number out loud, you'd feel like you had to do something about it, I said. And I didn't want to force the family conversation you weren't ready to have. So I just kept going. He was quiet. Then he said, "That's not fair to either of us." No, I agreed. It wasn't. I'm telling you all of this not because the ending is satisfying in the clean, complete way stories are supposed to be. It's not. It's messy and ongoing, and I still feel something uncomfortable in my chest sometimes when the whole family gets together, even now. But I'm telling you, because I understand something I didn't understand when I set up that first automatic transfer in a well-meaning moment of wanting to hold things together. You cannot fund your way into being valued. You cannot be generous enough, quiet enough, useful enough to make people see you as someone worth respecting. Those two things have nothing to do with each other. The $42,000 didn't buy me a seat at their table. It was the documentation, the simple, undeniable fact of what I had done, laid out in black and white on a Sunday afternoon in a house where people had laughed at me, that finally made the chair feel real, not because they owed me, but because I finally understood that I owed it to myself to be known.